My name is Daniel Parker, a 43-year-old architect from Minneapolis. I'd spent 15 years building my career designing sustainable residential communities, while my wife, Allison, worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative. We lived in a renovated craftsman home in a leafy suburb. Nothing extravagant but comfortable with character. The kind of place where neighbors actually knew each other's names. I'd always been the steady one. Predictably, my friends called me. I packed the same lunch every day, wore the same brands, and spent Saturday mornings at the local farmers market chatting with vendors I'd known for years. Allison was different, vibrant, social, constantly planning our next weekend getaway or dinner party. When we met at a charity auction 12 years ago, I was drawn to her spontaneity, and she said she found security in my reliability. That's why the changes were so subtle at first. I almost missed them. It started after my father passed away. Last February, Dad had been battling lung cancer for years, but his final decline happened quickly. I took 3 weeks off work to handle the funeral and begin sorting through his estate in Chicago. Dad had been meticulous with his finances, a trait is inherited, and he'd left behind a significant inheritance, mostly in property investments and his retirement portfolio. The lawyers estimated it would take about 6 months to transfer everything. When I returned home from Chicago, Allison seemed different, more attentive, perhaps. She started asking questions about my father's affairs, casual inquiries about the estate, the timeline, the properties. At first, it seemed like natural curiosity or concern for my well-being. She insisted I buy a new car to cheer myself up, suggested renovations to our house, and began talking about early retirement plans. Around that time, she also started working longer hours and attending more pharmaceutical conferences. Her wardrobe subtly upgraded, nothing flashy, just better quality pieces appearing in her closet. She was texting more frequently, always angling her phone away when I entered the room. Classic signs, looking back, but grief has a way of clouding your judgment. Then came the dinner with Brad Morgan, her regional manager, and his wife. The way Allison and Brad interacted, the inside jokes, the lingering glances, set off a quiet alarm in my mind. When Brad excused himself to take a call, I noticed Allison's eyes follow him, a slight smile playing at her lips. That night, as she slept beside me, I opened her unlocked iPad to check our shared calendar for an upcoming dentist appointment. A notification popped up, a message from Brad. "Can't wait for tomorrow, the usual place at noon?" I didn't confront Allison immediately. Something told me to wait, to observe. Maybe it was nothing, just a work meeting perhaps, but that night, sleep evaded me as I stared at the ceiling, replaying years of memories through a new, suspicious lens. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I waited until Allison left, kissing me goodbye with what now felt like hollow affection, before I began my investigation. Her laptop password was still my birthday, something that now seemed ironic. I wasn't proud of snooping, but what I found made my stomach churn. There were emails between her and Brad going back 4 months, shortly after my father's passing. At first they were casual, work-related. Then they grew personal, flirtatious, eventually explicit. But what turned my blood cold weren't the romantic betrayals, it was the financial discussions. How much exactly is coming from his dad? Brad had written, around $1.8 million in liquid assets, plus 2 rental properties in Chicago. Allison had replied, the transfer should be complete by September. Perfect timing. Martinez is holding the Costa Rica property until then. Once we have the cash, we're free. They were planning to take my inheritance and disappear. The woman I'd built a life with for 12 years was orchestrating an exit strategy that hinged on my father's death. I printed key emails, then carefully covered my digital tracks. That afternoon, I visited my bank and discovered Allison had been added as a signatory to my main account 3 weeks earlier, something I vaguely remembered signing during a busy morning when she'd handed me updated bank forms. My signature was there, but I had no memory of agreeing to this change. When Allison returned that evening, I played the role of distracted, grieving son perfectly. She asked about the estate timeline over dinner, and I mentioned casually that there were complications that might delay things by several months. The flash of disappointment in her eyes was unmistakable before she masked it with concern. "Oh, honey, what kind of complications?" she asked, her fork suspended mid-air. "Just some tax issues Dad didn't resolve. Nothing serious, but it will take time," I lied, watching her text under the table, undoubtedly updating Brad about the delay. That night, I created a new email address and reached out to my father's attorney, explaining the situation in detail. His response was immediate. "Say nothing, change nothing, we'll handle this carefully. Come to my office tomorrow." For the next 6 months, I lived with a stranger who thought she was deceiving me. Every kiss felt like betrayal. Every "I love you" like a knife twisting deeper. Living a double life takes a toll on you. Each morning I'd kiss Allison goodbye, maintaining the facade of a happily married man dealing with grief. Each night I'd lie beside her, feeling the gulf between us grow while she thought I remained oblivious. The betrayal consumed my thoughts. I lost 15 pounds. Colleagues commented on my distraction, attributing it to my father's death rather than my dying marriage. Meanwhile, Allison's behavior grew more calculated. She suggested we update our wills, casually mentioning that we should each be the sole beneficiary of the other's estate to simplify things. She began accompanying me to meetings with my father's attorney, Mark Wilson, insisting she wanted to support me through the process. During one such meeting, Allison placed her hand on mine in a show of solidarity as Mark discussed the timeline. "We're just eager to put this behind us and start fresh," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Mark, who knew everything, maintained his professional poker face while I fought the urge to pull my hand away. The most painful moment came at a dinner party with our closest friends, the Johnsons and the Taylors. We'd known these couples for years, shared vacations, celebrated birthdays, helped through hardships. "We're thinking of taking a sabbatical once Daniel's inheritance comes through," Allison announced over dessert, her hand resting possessively on my shoulder. "Maybe Costa Rica. Daniel deserves a break after everything." "That's the first I'm hearing of Costa Rica," I said carefully. Allison laughed, squeezing my shoulder too tightly. "Oh, I've mentioned it several times, honey. You've been so distracted lately." Our friends nodded sympathetically, and Rachel Johnson added, "Grief does that. My mother's passing left me in a fog for months." "It's more than just a vacation idea," Allison continued. "I've been researching properties there. Actually, Brad from work has a connection, a beautiful place near Tamarindo Beach." The casual mention of Brad made my jaw clench. She was gaslighting me in front of our friends, laying groundwork to explain our eventual disappearance. They would remember this conversation when we suddenly moved abroad, nodding knowingly about plans that had never included me. Later that night, I discovered a passport application for Allison under her maiden name, hidden in her desk drawer. Next to it was a brochure for a Costa Rican resort with handwritten notes about long-term rental options. One notation read, "B says property transfer can be expedited for cash." I photographed everything before carefully replacing it exactly as I'd found it. That night, as Allison slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my heart thundering with a mixture of rage and devastating heartbreak. The woman I'd loved was a stranger wearing a familiar face. 5 months into my charade, I nearly broke. Pretending not to know was eating me alive. I'd developed insomnia, checking Allison's messages while she showered, documenting her lies while maintaining a calm facade. But everything changed when I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Daniel Parker?" a woman's voice asked. "Speaking," I replied, stepping out of my office for privacy. "My name is Jessica Winters. I think we need to talk about Brad Morgan and your wife." My heart stopped. "I'm listening." "I was Brad's fiancée until 3 months ago," she explained, her voice bitter. "I found their messages. They've been planning to take your inheritance and disappear to Costa Rica. Brad bought property there last year under a shell company. We met at a coffee shop across town. Jessica had screenshots, dates, recordings from a home security system Brad didn't know about. She'd caught them discussing me like I was nothing more than an obstacle, laughing about how oblivious I was. "They think you're a fool," Jessica said, sliding a USB drive across the table. "I thought you deserved to know. That night I watched the videos with a strange calmness. There was Allison in Brad's living room, sitting close together on his couch. "Daniel suspects nothing?" Brad asked, pouring wine. Allison laughed. "Please, he's still grieving his dad and buried in work. By the time the money transfers, we'll have everything in place." "What about the properties? We'll sell them immediately. He's so trusting, he's letting me handle all the paperwork." "And if he figures it out?" Allison's smile chilled me. "He won't. 15 years I've known him. Daniel sees what he wants to see." I shut off the video, surprisingly calm. The uncertainty was gone. Now I had irrefutable proof and a new ally in Jessica. Together, we developed a plan that would give Allison and Brad exactly what they wanted, until it became their worst nightmare. I contacted Mark Wilson again, sharing the new evidence. "We're ready to move forward," I told him. "I want the inheritance transfer ceremony to happen exactly as scheduled, with one important modification." For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The turning point had arrived, and with it came a strange sense of liberation. The countdown to the inheritance transfer and my own justice had begun. If you're following Daniel's journey and can't wait to see how he outsmarts these betrayers, hit that subscribe button now. Trust me, the payback that's coming is something you won't want to miss. With a clear plan taking shape, I felt reborn. The fog of betrayal lifted as I channeled my energy into meticulous preparation. First, I secured my personal finances. I opened new accounts at a different bank under my name only, transferring small amounts gradually to avoid alerting Allison. I changed passwords on everything except the accounts I wanted her to monitor. Those I left as digital breadcrumbs in my trap. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. Weekend golf with my college roommate became a regular escape, though I shared nothing about my marital situation. These small reprieves kept me sane as I continued the performance at home. Jessica proved invaluable. As Brad's former fiancée, she knew his patterns, his passwords, his weaknesses. She forwarded me emails where they discussed the inheritance, including a damning message where Brad boasted to a friend, "Once her husband's daddy's money lands, Allison and I are gone." Poor sucker won't know what hit him. I hired a private investigator who documented their meetings, photographed them entering hotels, and compiled a timeline of their affair. The evidence was overwhelming and would prove crucial, not just for my peace of mind, but for the legal proceedings I was quietly preparing. "You're handling this remarkably well," Mark Wilson commented during one of our private meetings. "What choice do I have?" I replied. "Fall apart. Give them the satisfaction." Mark nodded approvingly. "Most clients in your situation let emotion drive their decisions. You're thinking strategically." "I learned from my father," I said. "He always said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time, then make your plans accordingly." At home, I played my part perfectly. When Allison suggested we open a joint investment account for the inheritance, I agreed enthusiastically. When she mentioned Brad's financial advisor, who works wonders for high-net-worth clients, I asked for his contact information. I was giving her exactly what she wanted, watching her grow increasingly confident. One evening, as we reviewed the final inheritance paperwork together, Allison placed her hand on mine. "Your father would be proud of how you're handling this," she said, her eyes conveying sincerity that once would have moved me. "Thanks," I replied, squeezing her hand. "I'm just following his example, being thorough, methodical." "That's what I've always loved about you," she said. "Your reliability." I smiled, thinking of the flash drive hidden in my office safe, of Jessica meeting with the district attorney, of the forensic accountant documenting the money trail between Brad and the Costa Rican property developer. "Just 3 more weeks," I said. "Then it'll all be over." She had no idea how right I was. The weeks before the inheritance transfer ceremony became a period of profound personal transformation. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Levine, careful to schedule appointments during my lunch breaks to keep them hidden from Allison. In those sessions, I began processing not just the betrayal, but how I'd lost myself in the marriage. "You mentioned always being the reliable one," Dr. Levine noted during one session. How did that role serve Allison's narrative? The question hit me like a thunderbolt. My predictability had made me the perfect mark. While I'd seen it as a virtue, Allison had seen it as exploitable. She knew exactly how I would react in any situation, which made me easy to manipulate. I don't want to be that person anymore, I admitted. Then who do you want to be? Dr. Levine asked. That question became my North Star. I began making small, deliberate changes. I joined a rock climbing gym, something the old Daniel would never have considered too risky. I registered for a creative writing workshop, exploring a passion I'd abandoned years ago. I reconnected with my college friend Michael, a corporate attorney whose advice proved invaluable. Each new experience felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Meanwhile, Allison noticed the changes, but misinterpreted them entirely. "You seem different lately," she observed one evening as I returned from climbing. "More energetic." "I'm finally coming out of the grief fog," I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. I was grieving, not just my father, but the marriage I thought I had. She smiled, touching my arm. "It's good to see. I've been worried about you." The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd orchestrated elaborate betrayal while convincing herself she cared. In her mind, she could steal my inheritance and abandon our marriage while still being the supportive wife. The mental gymnastics were almost impressive. As the transfer date approached, Allison grew increasingly attentive, even initiating intimacy that I politely deflected with excuses of stress and fatigue. Each night after she fell asleep, I'd slip out to the garage where I kept a locked filing cabinet with copies of all the evidence. I'd review the documentation, strengthening my resolve. 1 week before the transfer, I met with Mark Wilson for final preparations. "Are you sure about this approach?" he asked. "It's rather theatrical." "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "They created this drama. They deserve the full production." "And afterward?" he asked. "Have you thought about that?" I nodded, surprising myself with my clarity. For the first time in months, I'm actually looking forward to the future. Whatever it brings, it'll be on my terms. Mark smiled. "Your father would have approved." The day of the inheritance transfer arrived, a crisp September morning with early autumn leaves swirling across the lawn of Wilson & Associates law firm. Allison had dressed impeccably in a navy sheath dress, her hair freshly highlighted. Makeup perfect. I wore my father's watch and his lucky tie clip, small connections to him on this pivotal day. "Nervous?" Allison asked as we pulled into the parking lot. "Just ready for this chapter to close," I replied truthfully. The conference room was set up formally, leather chairs surrounding a mahogany table, documents arranged in neat stacks. Mark Wilson greeted us with practiced professionalism, giving no indication of our private arrangements. 2 other attorneys from the firm were present, along with a notary and the executor of my father's estate. "Before we begin," Mark announced, "we're still waiting on a few participants." Allison glanced at me, confused. "I thought it was just us signing today." The conference room door opened. Brad Morgan entered, stopping short when he saw me. "What's he doing here?" I asked, feigning surprise and anger. Allison paled visibly. "Brad is helping me with investment options for the inheritance. I mentioned his financial expertise." Before I could respond, Jessica Winters walked in, followed by 2 serious-looking individuals in suits. "What is this?" Allison demanded, her voice rising as she recognized Jessica. "Mrs. Parker," Mark interjected smoothly. "These are Agents Calloway and Washington from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They've been investigating some transactions related to property acquisitions in Costa Rica." Brad stepped backward. "I should go. This seems like a family matter." "Actually, Mr. Morgan, you'll want to stay," Agent Calloway said, moving to block the door. "We have some questions about Oceanic Holdings LLC and wire transfers totaling $240,000. I turned to Allison, whose face had drained of color. "What's going on?" I asked, maintaining my ignorant facade one last time. Jessica stepped forward, placing a laptop on the conference table. "I think it's time for some honesty, don't you?" She opened the computer and pressed play. The video was crystal clear. Allison and Brad in his living room, explicitly discussing their plan to take my inheritance and disappear. Their laughter as they mocked my trust, their detailed timeline. Allison lunged for the laptop. "That's private." "You can't—" "Actually," Agent Washington interjected, "this recording is now evidence in a federal investigation into conspiracy, wire fraud, and attempted grand larceny." I finally dropped the pretense, meeting Allison's panicked gaze directly. 6 months, I said quietly. I've known for 6 months. Every lie, every secret meeting, every plan for my father's money. Her mouth opened and closed wordlessly as comprehension dawned. She wasn't the mastermind after all. She had been outplayed at her own game. The next hour unfolded like a scene from a courtroom drama. Agents Calloway and Washington took turns, laying out their case. Brad had established a shell company to purchase Costa Rican property using illegally obtained funds. Allison had attempted to gain control of assets that weren't rightfully hers. Their text messages, emails, and recorded conversations provided a damning timeline of conspiracy. We've been building this case for 3 months, Agent Calloway explained. Mr. Parker's cooperation has been instrumental. Allison's shock gave way to desperate bargaining. Daniel, we can talk about this, she pleaded, reaching for my hand. It wasn't what it looked like. Save it for your attorney, I replied, moving my hand away. Everything was exactly what it looked like. Brad, meanwhile, crumbled immediately. It was her idea, he insisted, pointing at Allison. She approached me about the plan after her father-in-law died. Said the money was practically hers already. Allison's face contorted with rage. You lying bastard. You showed me the property listings. You set up the offshore accounts. Their unified front disintegrated into mutual accusations as the agents separated them for formal questioning. Mark Wilson slid new documents across the table to me, divorce papers already prepared. The inheritance transfer is still proceeding today, he explained, but with the modifications we discussed, the trust protections are ironclad. I signed where indicated, a surreal calm washing over me. The inheritance, $1.8 million in liquid, assets plus the Chicago properties, would transfer into a protected trust with specific distribution conditions that Allison couldn't touch. The divorce filing cited fraud and criminal conspiracy, with evidence that would make contesting it futile. As Allison was escorted out for formal questioning, she turned back. 15 years together, and you do this to me. The audacity nearly took my breath away. You were planning to steal my inheritance and disappear with another man, I replied evenly. What exactly did you expect me to do? Jessica approached as the agents led Brad and Allison away. Feels anticlimactic somehow, doesn't it? After months of planning. Not anticlimactic, I corrected her. Just clarifying, like waking up from a long, confusing dream. Later that evening, I returned to an empty house. Allison had been released pending formal charges, but had gone to her sister's, leaving a voicemail full of tears and recriminations. I changed the locks, opened a bottle of my father's favorite whiskey, and sat on the back porch watching darkness fall. For the first time in 6 months, I felt no need to pretend, no need to monitor my words or expressions, no need to play a role in someone else's drama. The betrayal still hurt, but now it was a clean wound that could finally begin to heal. 18 months later, I stood on the front porch of a renovated Victorian in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood, one of my father's investment properties, now my home. The legal proceedings against Allison and Brad had concluded months ago. Brad received 3 years for wire fraud and financial conspiracy. Allison, after accepting a plea deal, served 8 months in a minimum security facility, followed by probation. The divorce was finalized quickly, with the evidence leaving little room for negotiation. Allison received only what she had brought into the marriage, considerably less than she'd planned to take. The Chicago Tribune ran a small article about the case, calling it a sophisticated inheritance theft scheme foiled by the intended victim. I declined interview requests, preferring to rebuild my life quietly. I'd left Minneapolis and my architectural firm there, accepting a partnership offer from a Chicago-based sustainable design studio. The position allowed me to honor my father's legacy by renovating his properties into energy-efficient community spaces. The first project, converting an old warehouse into affordable artist studios, had just won a Green Building Award. Jessica had moved on too, accepting a teaching position in Colorado. We'd stayed in touch, our unusual friendship forged, In shared betrayal evolving into occasional texts and updates. She was dating again. I was focused on rebuilding. "Earth to Daniel," a voice called, breaking my reverie. My sister Kate stood in the doorway, her 2 children peeking around her. Legs. "The guests are arriving, stop brooding on the porch." "Not brooding," I corrected, following her inside, reflecting. The house was filled with warmth and conversation. Friends, neighbors, colleagues gathered for the housewarming. A year ago, such social events would have filled me with anxiety. Now they felt like affirmations of the new life I'd built. Michael, my college friend who'd helped navigate the legal aftermath, approached with 2 beers. "Quite an upgrade from staring at evidence files in your garage at midnight," he observed. I laughed, accepting the beer. "Remember when you told me I'd feel normal again someday?" "I didn't believe you." "Normal is overrated," he replied. "You're better than normal. You're awake." Later, as guests mingled in the backyard, Kate cornered me by the grill. "I'm worried." "About you," she admitted. "After everything with Allison, you seemed hollowed out." I acknowledged. Pretending not to know was harder than finding out in the first place. And now? I considered the question, watching as neighbors and new friends chatted on the patio my father had built decades ago. "Now I'm grateful," I said finally. Not for the betrayal, but for what it taught me. About resilience, about starting over, about trusting myself first. "Dad would be proud," Kate said, squeezing my arm. "He always said you were the architect in more ways than one." She was right. I had designed this new life, blueprint by careful blueprint, and the foundation felt solid beneath my feet. 3 years to the day after discovering Allison's betrayal, I stood in the community garden that had once been an abandoned lot behind one of my father's properties. Local families tended vegetables in raised beds, children played on equipment made from sustainable materials, and a small plaque honored my father's memory. The Thomas Parker community space had become a neighborhood treasure. The inheritance that Allison and Brad had plotted to steal had instead created something lasting. One property had become affordable housing, another an arts center. The liquid assets they'd coveted now funded scholarships for architecture students focusing on sustainable community design. I walked through the garden, greeting neighbors by name. Mrs. Chen proudly showed me her tomatoes. Mr. Washington discussed plans for the Fall Harvest Festival. These connections, authentic, straightforward, based on mutual respect, had helped restore my faith in people. Dating had come later, tentatively at first. I'd recently started seeing Claire, a landscape architect I'd met through a community project. She knew my story. The whole city seemed to know it after the case made headlines, but she'd never treated me like a victim or a curiosity. "Everyone has a before and after moment in life," she'd said on our first date. "Yours just made the newspaper." My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Channel 5 just ran your interview about the community center. Dad would have loved it." Attached was a photo of her children playing in the garden last weekend, their hands dirty from planting sunflowers. As the sunset painted the Chicago skyline in amber and gold, I realized something profound. The betrayal that once defined my days had faded to a distant chapter. It had shaped me but no longer controlled me. The inheritance Allison had coveted had created a legacy she could never have imagined. One of community, purpose, and authentic connection. Sometimes, the worst betrayals lead us exactly where we need to be. Not because betrayal is ever justified, but because overcoming it reveals strengths we never knew we possessed. Thank you for staying with Daniel's story until the end. His journey from betrayal to rebuilding demonstrates how resilience can transform even our darkest moments into opportunities for growth and meaning. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales of justice and transformation. Your comments mean everything. Have you ever discovered someone's true colors just in time, or rebuilt your life after betrayal? Share your experiences below, and let us know what story you'd like to hear next. More relationship betrayals, workplace injustice, or family deceptions. The most compelling human stories are the ones where justice prevails against all odds, and your feedback helps us bring those stories to life. Until next time, remember that your worst day can become the foundation of your best life. If you have the courage to rebuild,